the Warp Spinster here. Welcome to my channel and thanks for spending some time with me today. My neighbor is mowing his leaves today. Wouldn't you know? I have a limited window of time to film this, so if I cut out from time to time, it's because the mower is getting too close and it's going to be very loud in your ears as it is in mine. So we are going to be working some more on the Pioneer braid, the wonky Pioneer braid. So we did a couple of pieces the first week. Let me just move these out of the way. That was a bad idea. And we used some shapes that were more wedge shaped, some that were just straight, varying widths of the strips, etc., etc. So all kinds of wonkiness. But we did black and white prints on one side and brights on the other. There's another piece here. We thought maybe a black circle might make things pop a bit. And here comes the mower. And then last week we did one that mimicked sort of a knit stitch and used brights alternating with black on white prints. And then cut the edges straight, sort of. Well, straight, but not necessarily parallel. So it has some wonkiness in it. We did some wedges, but I tried to keep these interstitial pieces here much narrower, like 1/4 of an inch or so. These vary a little bit, but I ended up liking that narrow 1/4 of an inch the best. So that's where we left it, as a knit one, purl one kind of thing. And we were going to talk about purl today, which we will do. But a couple of things first. Raymond had suggested in the comments that I do sort of a snowball block thing at the bottom of these V's to mimic the knitting more. So I think I know what he's saying, Raymond. If I'm wrong, tell me in the comments, and thank you for your comments and suggestions as always. So I'm going to give that a try. And I think I'm going to use a black on white print and probably not a very large piece across here. So I think he just means a square with a sew and flip over. So I want to give that a try. I have some strips here, and I also have some 2.5 inch squares, scraps. So let's give that a try and see how it works. It's going to be pretty much the same concept. This is just kind of a comedy of errors. When Larry moves over to the other side of the yard, so you won't be able to hear him, then a big plane takes off overhead. This is just, and then once the plane is gone, of course, his mower is over on this side. This is a hoot. They're good neighbors. Oh dear. We'll see if I can get through this. All right, so we have some bright colored strips here and some black on white prints. And I'm going to take just a couple of strips. Let's start with these two. And it will just be a matter of right sides together, sew and flip. Then I will do this down here, although I wouldn't have to use a square, and certainly not a 2.5 inch square. But I will do that, never mind, let me come back here. I will do it in a white on black. Seem to have only black on white here, but I will find a bit of white on black so that I can do a V shape here before I put on these strips. You'll see when I get there. A moment of reprieve. I have turned the mower off to empty the bag, no doubt. All right. So I have cut not even quite a square. You could, of course, do a full square and then fold it back. I don't think I want that large of a piece there. So I would probably bring it back here. Could be straight across, but doesn't have to be, could be wonky. I think I'm actually going to cut this piece into 2 triangles. And then I'll do one that's reasonably straight, at least as straight as I can eyeball it. And then the next one we'll do will be a little wonkier. So I will sew this on, and then I will sew these strips on. So whether or not it looks like more of a knit stitch, it is kind of an interesting design choice. You could also put like a solid color in here, but I think in this case I want it to blend in with the background here. And now the 3 German Shepherds next door on the other side of me are out. This is oh golly. All right, so I've got this piece on. Turned out to not be all that straight. Winston is unhappy about Larry and Josh doing yard work. All right, so here's what I'm going to do next. Perhaps the din will have subsided by the time I finish this and come back. I'm sorry about this, folks. There's just really is a limited period of time I can film this, so I will be back with this completed, and I probably, as long as I'm there, will also put on 2 bright strips. All right, now I have sewed this on and I'm ready for another piece down here. I could make it shorter so that it's like this. I could make it longer so that it comes to that point here. Or I could make it wonky, and I've cut a longer piece for that because it needs to cover more area when it's on a diagonal. And that would bring it up to meet that point. I could go like that, but I don't think I want to. I think I want it to roughly meet that point. So I think I might do it about there. And then I want to trim it in line with how I'm going to sew on the black on white strips. Some more crumbs to play with later. All right, and then a couple more strips. I already have these cut, so I may just, oh, Winston saw Josh raking. All right, so I'll put that on that side, and somewhere I have another narrow piece, I thought, that I had cut, but maybe not, so I'll cut another one. I am making these finished at 1/4 inch, which means that I'm cutting them at 3/4 of an inch, which seems incredibly narrow when I'm cutting them, but works out all right. So I will do that and we'll see how it looks when it's finished. Here we have it. This bit is kind of distracting to me while we're looking at it, so I'll just put a piece there for the moment. So we have these little snowball blocks. They sew and flip. I keep wanting to say flip and sew, but it's sew and flip. Reasonably straight, kind of wonky. You could do it again where this was shorter down here. You could do these in a different color. Ooh, this would be kind of interesting. If you did, you could do white on black on one side here, black on white on the other side, and then have either one accent color or varied bright colors doing these points coming down, which would be kind of fun. You wouldn't need to alternate anything here, although you could certainly do, say, a solid black, but you could just do it without these interspaces in here, such as we did here. So that could be kind of fun, and you wouldn't have to do it every time either. Oh, so you could do some strips of these various strips, and then have the black on white and white on black, maybe with black alternating here in here if you want that, and then do just maybe one of these per strip or 3 per strip if it's longer, so you've got those little pops everywhere. That could be kind of fun. all kinds of choices. All right, so that's that suggestion. Thank you, Raymond, for that. Gave us some other things to consider and think about. And while we're talking about the knit portion yet, this is something that I worked on over the week. And if you remember, we talked about doing stripes with stripes, and I thought it might be too much, but I'm using this diagonal stripe, which is from me and my sisters this year. It's part of their Halloween collection. I didn't know they had Halloween collections. Maybe this is the first year. But then I use these subtle stripes and a dot from Tula Pink, also this year. So you can't, I know they don't show as well even on camera, but they're pretty subtle. They're not big, bold stripes. And the dots I put in there just as a break from having all stripes. You could certainly do all stripes. I did some of the stripes on the bias, some on straight, one on straight. And I really like this look. As long as these read almost solid, but have that little bit of texture in it, then this is not too jarring. Now, if I had really bold stripes here, I think that would be a different story. But I do like this. I think I'm going to continue on with this. I might have to run to my friendly neighborhood quilt shop and pick up some more of the Tula Pink stripes. I do have, I think, a couple more of the stripes and one more dot. I want to have more stripes than dots, but I do want to throw a dot in every once in a while just to give it a little bit of extra interest. So that's one of the things on my board. I have lots of braids going on now. So that's the knit portion. And now we want to talk about the purl. And the purl stitch looks roughly like a loop. And I'm thinking there are a couple of ways we can do that. One is to just do some curves, just some random improv curves, and just sort of stack them with a background in between. So kind of, where's my knit one, purl one? Here we are. So such as we did here. Oh, but we could reverse it, couldn't we? We could do the, well, I guess it's not really going to matter. It depends on whether we're going to have wide purl stitches and narrow background, and then another wide stitch. But we could reverse this so that the wider purl is in the black on white, or maybe we could switch to white on black. And then have in between be the narrow so that it sort of contrasts with what we have here, which adds a little more interest to it. Anyway, so we could, we could do either improv curves or we could do bias strips. And the bias strips would, I think for some, say a stripe, if we wanted to do a stripe, a bias strip would be better so that we don't have stripes going along a curve like this, but they'll sort of go with the curve. And I do have a couple of this broader stripe. This is the Michael Miller. Shoot, this is horrible. This is the circus stripe. Really, Larry? So that was a little steeper curve, but it still works fine. And I'm going to trim it just so visually we can see what's happening here. And of course, this curve doesn't need to match that one either, but trim it up here a bit because I feel like being neat. And now definitely want to do some different colors going down. And that may still be too wide. If you look at it through the camera, I can get a better visual. Yeah, I think that's still too wide. So this one, I think I would want to trim that down to smaller. Although I do have some pretty wide pieces here, so probably would want to vary that. And I almost wonder if I wouldn't rather have a white on black here. I think I'm going to try that. This is, you know, an experimental piece, so we can give that a try and see if I like it better. So a white on black, I'm going to narrow this down and put in a narrow white on black here. I made that curve. I decided that it was really too wide in relation to this. This is like 6 inches wide. This is narrower than that. I trimmed it down some because it just looked too wide in relation to this one, even though they are not the same width. And actually they're pretty close to. So I want to just trim this a little bit just so we can see that as a curve rather than a straight piece. And I almost think I want to trim a little more. I know, after all that work, I'm just going to cut it off there. But I think that's better visually if there's less. I don't know if it's the curve or that these are a little wider or what it is, but it's definitely needs to be shorter. And I haven't decided yet how I feel about the white on black, if I like it better than this. This certainly, if I do the black on white, then it certainly ties in better with this in that sense. But do I want a contrast, or is the curve versus the straight enough of a contrast? I think I'm going to have to ponder on that for a little while. Not sure I'm ready to make that decision. And maybe I need to do another white on black strip down here to see how I feel. Just not sure about that. And I'm not sure about what I don't want these to be narrower. I put the wider down with the wider strips down there, it's better. So I think at the very least I need to vary the width. These are about the same and they're pretty wide. So I think I would want, say, this one to be fairly narrow, so it's more like one of these pieces. So a little more pondering to do on the freeform curve, improv curve of the Purl. But what do we want to do with these bias strips? I really am thinking that that is probably, well, here's a thought though. Since it's a bias strip, and we can put some curve on it, what if we just made it a very narrow piece in between? So say a curve like this. So there's a lot of this, but then you would have, I have it, no, I cut that piece straight. Let me cut this piece over here just so we, oops. This is what improv is all about, folks. Cutting through things. All right, so if we make that just a very narrow piece here, but with a decent sized curve, yeah, I'm just faking it here, but I could make that curvier. And then another curvy piece here. That's not so bad. If it's a narrow strip, then it's not so bad. But having, this is like 6 inches, as I said. If I, oops, I guess it's more like this. If I were to make this 6 inches wide, it would be wow, and really distracting. And it might be distracting this way, but it certainly would be less distracting this way. So I might try that. Let me see what I have for reasonably wide pieces for the here, and I want to cut curves for those to follow. Now again, because these are wide strips, it can't be crazy curve. And then of course I have a choice of what I use to stitch this down. And I could choose a bright contrasting color. I could choose white, I could choose black, I could choose, it sounds like a song, doesn't it? Anyway, so I could just do it this way. In this case, I don't think I need to cut the circle underneath because this is wide enough. I believe I could do that. I believe I may want to, I'll put this on a stabilizer, and I think I might want to kind of do a little dab of glue stick here and there to hold them into position, because I really would like this to be a pretty big curve. So I might tug a little bit on this side, because if I do a tighter curve, I'll need more fabric on this side than up on the top of it. All right, have I belabored this enough that I can now sit down and do it? I'm going to put some stabilizer under here and little dabs of glue stick to hold that down while I stitch it. And you know what? I have white on the machine, so I'm going to do white for the thread. All right, this isn't pretty, but I've got just a couple dabs of glue on there to hold everything in place. When I stitch a bias strip on a curve, I always like to stitch the inside curve, the convex, or the concave, sorry, first, and then I'll do the convex, because it's easier to, because it's on the bias, stretch this out a little bit to fit around the curve. That is easier than trying to ease in extra fabric up here. So I like to get this settled in first, and then I can stretch that to fit if I need to. All right, I prettied it up a little bit for you. This needs to be a curve too. It'll drive me a little crazy. There we are, funky curve. So then I would have to decide if I want to do, say, this piece down here next, or up there next, whichever. Or do I want to continue with the wider stripe? I almost think I want to do the wider stripe, because I somehow think that the eye is going to read this as, it will be less jolt, the continuity of it between will be easier for the eye. It will still move around, but it isn't going to, whoop, there's this stripe, and whoop, now there's that stripe, and there's that stripe. Which means that if I want this, say, as the background piece, then I could make these the applique pieces, and Sorry. Bad curve. Just have this solid background of solid. The stripe background, just have a sheet of that and then applique the purl curves on. And that way I could have steeper curves, which is another thing that's causing me to wonder about this. We've got several things going on that we might use. This is too big. Now it may be that it's just too wide, but I think it's because these pieces are too big. This one, I'd like, well, on all of them, I'd like more of a curve. So I think I'm going to say take this stripe because it's, do I? Because it will be a diagonal. It's straight cut on it would be diagonal. Let me grab a piece of this, which is on straight, though it wouldn't have to be. I could cut the piece on the diagonal and then have curved pieces that I applique on top. Or it could be straight that I have pieces appliqued on top. Well, let's try a little bit each way and see what happens. So, oh, my precious fabric. And then do a piece that is on, wait, did I just do a piece on the straight? That's a piece on the straight, so I want a piece on the diagonal. I'll get it together. No fear, I will get it together eventually. Okay, I do some small samples here till I know, because I do have a limited amount of this one. Well, I still didn't do it right, did I? Jeepers, Karen. All right, well, we're going to start with this. See how I like about the straight. Excuse me. So then I can applique a strip on top. So cut whatever curve I want, which this is a narrow strip, so it's not going to be much of a curve, to be honest. But I'm not going to be losing to the seam either when I'm appliquing. And it doesn't have to be a really perfect sort of curve. And once I've appliqued it, I could go in and trim behind it because that black is going to show through a lot of different fabrics. So I'm just cutting kind of a funky curve. And then I'll applique it on. I think I'll just do a zigzag. Applique that on, and then I have a yellow that's already got kind of a curve going on to start with. So I guess the curve doesn't really have to be parallel, does it? Could just be a pretty wonky strip. Which would probably be more fun. All right, I'm going to, do I have another strip I could use? That would be fun. Let's find something like a teal blue. That's a pretty narrow strip. Let's do a little bit wider. And you can see here, I think, that I'm going to need to trim behind there, but that's all right. I can do it. Actually, I'm kind of digging this triangle thing. This is a whole other, a whole other design coming up here. And this is kind of fun because I really can do some fun curves. Okay. So I'm going to put some stabilizer under here, do some zigzagging, and let's see how it looks in the end. Those really aren't very curvy curves, are they? Now that I look at it. I'm kind of liking these are okay without being curvy curves. And it doesn't hurt to have different depths of curves either. This looks more like a boat. Now, of course, putting these on fusible web before cutting them would be better, but not doing that option today. So, stabilize, sew, and trim. We'll see. I'm not going to lie to you. This is my favorite so far. It was easier and quicker. That's not why it's my favorite. And I think it's got a lot of funk to it. Now, I was thinking I could, of course, do this as the purl stitch. And it could still be the purl stitch, but as a taking off point for another design, I could do, say, like half square triangle pieces where, or maybe they'll go this way. It would be fun to do half square triangles and then just start moving them around and playing with them. This is what I'm saying. I think it would be fun. Now, if we wanted it to be the knit purl business, it could certainly do that if it wasn't a triangle. And I think that would be okay too. It's not bothering me to have this stripe here if it's continuous. Then it's just kind of part of the background. And I think I like it better than these other pieces. Let me zoom out a little bit for you. I like the looks of it better. And I liked making it better. And that's important when we're doing a hobby that we love. We want to have as much fun as possible doing it. I'm thinking this is, not a bad option either for the purl stitch or just as its own design, or both. I'm kind of liking it either way. These, not so much, but I am liking this. And I see the sun is starting to invade our space, so I think, well, let me take care of that sun. Will help you, won't it, as well as me. There we are. So I think that's going to be it for today. We have explored another option that Raymond suggested with the fold over corner down here, which I think is kind of fun. And I like the option of maybe doing white on black and then white on black, black on white, and then pops of color down there. I think would be a lot of fun. I showed you one that's pretty. These are straight parallel pieces, but it's got a lot of energy to it, but at the same time, it's more calming than the wonky because these are even parallel strips. So I like that one a lot. Probably continue with that one. And then we started looking at different ways that we could do the purl stitch. We have 3 different options. I think this is my choice both for looks and for how much fun it is to make. And it may partly be the fabrics that I have chosen, because these are a little wilder than you find over here. But just pure aesthetics and fun, I think I prefer this one. Let me know what you think or what suggestions you have. I think next week I might explore this a little bit more. It could certainly work, I think, as the Purl piece. I might bring these a little closer together so there isn't as much of this, but I'm kind of even all right with more of that stripe. As I said, it's consistent, and I think it would make a nice, almost like a sashing in between those blocks. All right, let me know what you think. Thank you again for spending some time with me today. I hope I will see you next week when we'll play a little more with this. In the meantime, be well, be safe, be happy, be quilting. Peace out.